show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why.
Hello, and welcome to the historic Bennett's Bar. Opened in 1839, everything you can see from the Art Nouveau windows to the woodwork of the bar is from 1906. Personally, Bennett's is where my love of Scottish malt whisky fermented. When I moved to Scotland, I thought I had some kind of knowledge of malts. Until I walked into this bar, I looked above me at these gantries and realised I knew nothing at all. Even in the year that I've worked in Bennett's Bar, I've seen changes to the industry and to the norms of Scotch. Take age statements. For any budding malt drinker, the age of a bottle shows its quality. The higher the number, the better and more expensive the whisky. That may no longer be the case. Macallan, Auchentoshan, Laphroaig have moved away from age statements. Dealing in new flavour profiles and terms like American oak or quarter cask, some of the biggest names in whisky are changing what's been expected for hundreds of years. As the whisky industry finds itself at a crossroads of innovation and tradition, successfully enticing a younger and more knowledgeable audience, I want to expand my knowledge. We'll travel to arguably one of the most well-known of the whisky regions, Speyside, discovering how Glenfiddich distill and innovate with something like their experimental series. We'll make our way to Aberdeen with the 100 Scots, industry leaders discussing where the industry is going and how Scotland can be prouder of malt.
Or show me the way to the
With tourism, people are a lot more knowledgeable. You know, with social media, with all the information that's out there now, people are so much more informed about what it is that they're drinking and things like that. But that's actually quite a good thing. Because it means that they know a lot more about the products even before they come here, and you can kind of introduce them to maybe some slightly different ones that they've not tried before.
Here in the picturesque Glenfiddich distillery, our tour guide Uisge shows us some of the main stages of the distilling process and gives us the chance to taste some of their experimental series.
Okay, so these are our two mash tuns. So they're stainless steel, double-shelled vessels. And the objective of adding that water is we want to gelatinise the starch that's contained within the grist. So ultimately, what we're producing is a sweet, sugary water that's known as wort, W-O-R-T, that's going to go on to the next stage in the process. Okay, so this is our tun room that we have here. So many. We in here have 24 of our Canadian Douglas fir washbacks. Okay, now into each one of these we're taking 41,000 litres of the wort from the mashing process and adding it into here. What we're also doing is taking 250 litres of a liquid yeast and adding that into here as well. Our yeast is going to feed on our sugar and we're going to get a fermentation process. The longer you ferment, you're going to start to produce esters. And esters they're just chemical compounds, but that's what gives us that fruity characteristic. So think of things like apples, pears, even like a banana type characteristic. And that's key notes for Glenfiddich. Now, as a result of that, what we're looking to do is create an alcohol. It's known as our wash, and it's coming in at a strength of 9.6% alcohol by volume. Okay, that is what's going to go on to the next stage, and is going to go through distillation to become our spirit. Okay. From our tun room behind us here, our wash is first of all going to come through to our wash stills. When you apply a heat underneath the still, because alcohol boils at a lower temperature than water, your alcoholic vapours are going to separate and they're going to rise or start to rise up the still. Our heat source is gas furnaces that are burning directly underneath the stills. Okay, that's a direct, as I say, firing, and again it's something that the family have chosen to stick with. It's considered more of a sort of traditional way of firing underneath your stills. If you were to cut one of them in half, imagine it like holding a bunch of straws. Out with those pipes and within the shell, what you've got is your vapours dropping from the top down to the bottom. And as they do, this cooling effect that's created by the water means that we're taking our vapours back into a liquid form. Okay, so from that first distillation, what we produce is known as low wines. Yeah, now both spirits are combined before they get filled into the cask, so there's never any discrepancy between the two still types. I know there's all this, should I, shouldn't I? Trust me, a couple of drops.
After our tour of the distillery's mill room, washback, stillhouse and bottle plant, came the long-awaited tasting. A selection of Glenfiddich's 12, 15 and 18-year-olds was followed by Project 20, the second of their experimental series.
What I want you to do is just give it a quick swirl around in the glass, okay? And all that is to do is just to waken it up, just a little bit, get that flavour and aroma sort of developing. Have a little taste and see what you think. Okay. Now, what we're looking for, particularly with the 12-year-old, is a lot of that kind of pear and apple character. Project 20 is part of our experimental series. Now, the experimental series was launched just last year, pushed the boundaries slightly and come up with sort of new concepts for the whisky industry. This was number 2 in the series. Number 1 in the series was Glenfiddich IPA. So what we did is we finished a whisky in Indian Pale Ale casks. Number 2 with Project 20 here, what we did basically was invited our brand ambassadors to the distillery and let them loose in a warehouse. Each of them to choose their own cask, which was going to go forward into this particular bottling. It does, however, unfortunately bring us to the end of our tour.
I've really enjoyed my time in Glenfiddich, learning much more about the distilling process. But what about selling whisky? With modern innovation and more discerning customers, do drink retailers need to change the way that they sell malt? I joined the 100 Scots in Aberdeen, a meeting of some of the biggest names in Scottish hospitality. Irvin Tchaikovsky is a drinks ambassador for Diageo, selling scotch across the world.
As bartenders, we're always looking for new recipes, for new cocktails. We're looking to push ourselves forward and to come up with new, weird and wild and wacky and wonderful ingredients. We search the darkest corners of the internet. We look through cookbooks. We spend hours reading every cocktail book going, which is an amazing way to learn. But there's something that we miss. On your doorstep, this is the gateway to Speyside. But not only Speyside. You can go to Keith. I went to Keith yesterday, I went to Strathmill, I went to Elgin, I went to Glenelgin, I went to Linkwood. You literally have about 90 distilleries in an hour and a half radius of here. The closest distillery being Glengarry. I drove past that 45 minutes from here. So these places are, I think, is where we should be going for inspiration.
Imagine trying to plan a global strategy for a brand 12, 18, 21, 24, 25 years in advance. It's basically finger in the air. Yeah. We don't know the demand. But one thing we are really good at Diageo is doing is, and we have done it historically from the days of Alexander Walker, we keep stock. When we have a glut, we don't sell it all. We always maintain a level of stock. So I think we're now 11 million casks of whisky in Scotland.
It's not just Diageo, a lot of companies are now taking numbers off the bottles. And the industry looks at it 2 ways. First of all, because whisky's surrounded with... consumers are protective because whisky is synonymous with quality, Scotch is synonymous with quality. And a lot of customers shop by numbers. The bigger the number, the better quality. Fine, yeah, dated perception, but it is what it is. When numbers start coming off bottles, that's because we're adding younger whiskies, and a lot of people say, well, they're adding younger whiskies because we can't keep up with demand. Well, we say we're adding younger whiskies, so we've got more of a free rein to play with flavour. And our blenders love blending non-age statements.
Essentially, we can use these non-age statements, which have different flavour profiles, to engage more people in Scotch, whilst at the same time maintaining everyone's favourite Lagavulin 16, Talisker 10, Singleton, Dufton 12. So we are not going to drop our age statements. We're not going to do it as other major companies have done.
Graham Mackay, the UK and European sales executive from Morrison & Mackay, represents the lower tier of the whisky industry.
For me, the age statements disappearing is something I don't really like, but something that probably needs to happen with the lack of maybe stock going around. I'm in a different position because as an independent bottler, all of my stuff always has age statements, cask numbers, years, distillation dates, all the detail there. So there's room within the industry for a lot of the bigger guys are moving away from the age statements. A lot of the smaller guys are moving towards kind of keeping the detail there and actually going even more into detail than people are used to. It's not just whiskey, it's food and drink as a whole. People are wanting more local products, they want more knowledge about them, and they want to know where they've come from and who's made them and how they've made them. So that's just right across the board. I'm seeing that coming into gin, into cocktails, into food and drink. So that's something that's really starting to influence the industry, I think.
We've made our way across Scotland, sampling a selection of the whisky trail in Keith and Dufftown through Speyside and talking to industry leaders in Aberdeen. But really we've only told a fraction of the whisky story and where it is truly headed.